It was a calm Wednesday morning in late April when Danielle Mercer stepped through the doors of Heritage National Bank, a modest branch located in Little Rock, Arkansas. She wore a tailored navy blazer, dark denim jeans, and plain black flats. No jewelry, no designer bag, just a well-worn tote on her shoulder carrying a laptop, a scuffed notebook, and a favorite pen that hadn't written properly in weeks. She wasn't there to draw attention. In fact, she hoped to avoid it altogether. To any passerby, she looked like a professional stopping in to run an errand before work. That was exactly the impression she wanted to give. Danielle wasn't visiting to stir trouble or announce her presence. She had come to quietly assess the source of 3 separate complaints that had popped up in the monthly operations report. Nothing glaring, just subtle red flags, unexplained delays in wire transfers, complaints about impolite staff, and a string of ignored client calls. All of it pointed to this single location. And since it happened to be just 10 minutes from her second residence, she figured she'd take a personal look. As she stepped inside, she took note of the environment: clean floors, muted wall colors, polished counters. But the energy felt off, too quiet, too disengaged. One customer stood at a kiosk filling out a deposit slip. A young man waited in line with a check in hand. The tellers behind the counter barely glanced up. Danielle made her way to the front desk, where a woman in her 40s typed with theatrical slowness. "Good morning," Danielle said with a warm, professional tone. "Is the branch manager available?" The woman gave her a once-over, eyes pausing briefly on Danielle's modest clothes. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Danielle replied. "I'm with Halston and Reed Group. Just need a few minutes." The receptionist gave a vague nod and picked up the phone. "Someone from one of the business clients," she mumbled, shielding the receiver like Danielle was invisible. A moment later, the branch manager appeared from a nearby office. Mid-50s, wearing khakis, a sky-blue button-down, and a tired expression. His name tag read Richard Stratton. He approached with a faint smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Ma'am, we're a bit busy this morning." "What's this about?" Danielle extended a polite smile. "Just following up on some concerns we received from our corporate clients. A few business transactions flagged delay, some issues with communications, too." He raised his eyebrows. "And you're from Halston and Reed?" "Yes. I manage the corporate partnerships division." "And they sent you here, alone?" Danielle nodded. "It's a routine check. I handle our higher volume accounts, so I—" Richard chuckled to himself, cutting her off. "Right. Sure. Well, whatever this is, it's probably out of my scope. We're short-staffed and swamped with compliance nonsense. Honestly, half these complaints come from people who don't even understand how banking works." His tone was sharper now, his posture a little defensive. "I understand," Danielle replied evenly. "But in this case, the issues were well documented. Since Halston and Reed moved significant business through this location." "Let me stop you right there," Richard said, raising a hand midair like a traffic cop. "Look, I've been in banking for 3 decades. I know what this is, micromanaging. No offense, but we don't need random junior staffers coming in here with clipboards." He turned slightly, tugging on his tie, then muttered something low. Danielle couldn't catch it, but then he said it again, louder this time, clearly meant to be heard. "Figures they'd send the useless one." For a moment, time stood still. One of the tellers froze mid-transaction. A man in line looked up, frowning. Danielle stared at Richard, not blinking. And then, in a calm, clear voice, she spoke. Danielle's expression was unreadable, not angry, not shocked, just calm. Still, she drew in a slow, measured breath. "I'd like to speak with your regional director," she said evenly. "Today, if possible." Ronald gave a dry, dismissive laugh. "And I'd like a beach house in Naples. Maybe you'd like a latte while you wait, too," he added, voice laced with sarcasm. Without saying a word, Danielle opened her tote. No rush, no flinch. She retrieved a small black business card case, flipped it open, and pulled out a crisp card. She handed it to him smoothly. He took it without much thought until his eyes landed on the name. Then he froze. He looked at the card, then at her. Then back again, slowly. Danielle Mercer, Chief Executive Officer. Halston and Reed Group. His jaw slackened just slightly. The room didn't move. Neither did he. The only sign of life was a faint tremor in his fingers as he held the card like it had suddenly grown heavier. His eyes scanned it again, as if hoping there was some hidden detail proving this was all a mistake. Danielle said nothing. She didn't rush to explain. She didn't soften the blow. She just let him sit in it in the very lobby where he decided she wasn't worth his time. He started, voice barely audible. You're the CEO? She gave one simple nod, measured, composed. Behind the counter, the younger teller woman in her 20s quickly lowered her gaze and began pressing keys on her computer, though the screen hadn't changed. A man in line quietly stepped aside, pretending to check his phone, but he was clearly watching. Danielle gestured toward the hallway. Shall we? Ronald blinked. Yes, of course. This way. He turned to lead her to the glass-paneled meeting room, but the confident stride he'd worn earlier was gone. His steps were slower, more hesitant. At the door, he fumbled with the handle before finally opening it. Danielle stepped inside and took a seat, crossing one leg over the other. Ronald remained standing, unsure of what to do next. I just want to clarify, he began with a forced chuckle. I didn't realize who you were. I thought honestly I assumed you were with one of the satellite teams. You assumed a lot, she replied, her voice calm as ever. He gave a shaky laugh. It wasn't personal. We get a lot of people claiming they're from headquarters. Most of the time they don't even know what they're asking for. They don't understand the pressure we're under here, the constant compliance hurdles, the audits. She lifted one hand slightly. That was enough. I'm not here to debate your workload, Ronald, she said. I came because we've received specific complaints, not from random clients. From 3 of our most valued corporate partners, clients who've worked with us for years. This branch handles nearly a third of our business wire transactions. When that process becomes inconsistent, it matters. He swallowed hard. Danielle leaned forward, not threatening, just firm. Instead of taking 5 minutes to hear what I had to say, you dismissed me based on how I looked. You interrupted me 3 times. Then, in front of your staff and customers, you called me useless. His eyes dropped to the table. I didn't mean it like that. But you said it, she replied. The silence that followed wasn't loud with emotion. It was quiet and exact. It didn't need explanation. It simply existed, like a truth settling in. Ronald shifted uncomfortably, tugging at his sleeves, flattening his tie even though it hadn't moved. I'd like to speak with your regional director before noon, Danielle said, checking her watch. You'll make the call. I'll be here. He nodded, voice caught in his throat. Yes, of course. And Ronald, she added, as he started to turn. He looked back at her. From now on, assume everyone who walks through that door deserves your respect, regardless of their title. He nodded again, slower this time, but his face was a mess of emotions, confusion, guilt, and something else struggling to survive beneath the surface. Pride, maybe. Shame was fighting it, and losing. Danielle leaned back in her chair and pulled out a notepad. She scribbled notes not because she needed to, but to give her hands something to do. She didn't need to write a report. She was the report. What she didn't yet realize was that her presence had shifted something deeper than Ronald's discomfort. Someone else in that building had been waiting for a moment like this. 10 minutes passed. Through the glass, Danielle could see Ronald pacing in the far corner of the lobby, phone pressed tight to his ear, making short, aimless loops near the printer. He wasn't speaking anymore, just nodding and listening. A few moments later, there was a gentle knock at the door. It wasn't Ronald. It was the younger teller. Light brown curls gathered into a messy bun, name tag slightly askew, hands clasped nervously in front of her. Excuse me, she said softly. Sorry to bother you. I didn't want to let the moment pass. Danielle looked up. Go ahead. I'm Renee Mathis, the young woman said. I've only been here 6 months. I was right there when Mr. Stratton said what he did. And honestly, it wasn't the first time. He talks like that to women, to new staff, to anyone he thinks won't push back. Danielle said nothing, letting her speak. I didn't say anything earlier because... Well, I need this job, Renee added, glancing down the hall. But the way you handled him, calm, clear, no yelling, you didn't need to flex. And he still folded. Danielle smiled slightly. I've never needed to raise my voice. Renee stepped a little farther into the room. If corporate or HR does any kind of follow-up, I'll talk. I've got stories. Others do too. They're just scared. He plays favorites. He uses tone like a weapon. He acts like we're beneath him. Danielle nodded. Thank you. You didn't have to speak up. I guess I just wanted to say you made me feel like I wasn't imagining it. That I wasn't crazy. A brief pause passed between them. Something quiet, but honest. Then Renee gave a small nod and stepped back out into the lobby. Danielle leaned into the chair again, watching her walk away. She wasn't surprised, disappointed. Yes, but not surprised. She'd seen this play out before at investor meetings, in client boardrooms, even during interviews. The looks, the assumptions, the condescension dressed up as courtesy. This time, though, it had happened in broad daylight. And this time, it happened to the wrong woman. The door opened again. Ronald returned, his demeanor completely changed. His tie was loose. He held a manila folder like a security blanket. The regional director is available now, he said quietly. 15 minutes, video call. Danielle gave a nod and stood, set it up. He moved to the conference monitor, tapped a few buttons, and soon a face appeared on the screen. Mid-40s, dark blazer, silver earrings, composed expression. Good morning, the woman said. Is this Ms. Mercer? It is, Danielle replied. I'm Teresa Landon, Regional Operations. We weren't informed you'd be visiting this location today. That was intentional, Danielle answered. Teresa gave a small nod. Understood. Ronald remained off to the side, silent now, small in the background. Danielle stepped closer to the screen. There have been ongoing concerns at this branch, she said clearly. They've accumulated quietly. Today, I encountered behavior that confirmed a pattern: dismissive conduct, inappropriate language, and assumptions made solely on appearance. It wasn't just rude. It was unprofessional, and it points to a deeper cultural issue. Teresa didn't flinch. Thank you for your transparency. I'll begin a review right away. Can you remain on site for the next 30 minutes? I'd like to begin confidential interviews with staff. Danielle nodded. Yes, I'll be here. They're available, Danielle said. Ronald glanced up, and sure, may I? But she stopped him with just a look. Not now. He looked down, and the silence between them wasn't empty. It pulsed quiet, yes, but heavy. For Ronald, it marked the beginning of consequences he never thought would reach him. Danielle didn't say another word. She remained in the glass-walled conference room as staff members were quietly called in, one by one, for private interviews with Teresa Landon's team via video. Nervous at first, each employee walked in with hesitation, but something started to shift. It was as if a locked door had finally been cracked open. Renee was the first. Then Kendall Rhodes, the assistant manager, who had endured quietly for over a year. Next came a part-time staffer from operations, who admitted she'd stopped sharing ideas in meetings because Ronald always shot them down and made her feel foolish. Each person had a different story. Each carried a unique wound. But as they spoke, a pattern emerged, one too loud to ignore. Danielle sat quietly throughout, absorbing it all. Not just the failures of a single manager, but the resilience of the people around him, their restraint. How many had convinced themselves to stay silent for the sake of peace? A soft knock broke her focus. Ronald entered again, this time holding a mug of water. His hands trembled just enough for her to notice. May I? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. She didn't answer, but she didn't stop him. He placed the mug on the table, then slowly sat across from her. No longer sure of his footing. I know saying sorry doesn't fix anything, he started. But I owe you one. Danielle looked him straight in the eye. Is that because I'm the CEO or because I'm a person? He paused. Both. That second one should have been enough. He nodded, struggling with words. I've worked my whole life to get here. This industry, it wears you down. It's easy to get cold. That's not cold, Ronald, she said calmly. That's something else. He looked at her, not her clothes, not her skin, not her posture. Just her, for the first time. I misjudged you, he admitted. Worse than that, I disrespected you. And I probably do it more often than I realize. Danielle waited a beat. Why do you think that is? He opened his mouth, then closed it. Finally, he spoke. You want the honest answer. Because I've always gotten away with it. No one ever checked me. I see someone walk in, and if they don't fit a mold, I assume they don't matter. And when I saw you, he stopped himself. I assumed even less. It was raw, ugly, but real. Danielle leaned in slightly. You think 30 years in the business gives you a license to coast. To cut people down because you're tired. If that's the case, you should have walked away 10 years ago. No one begged you to stay. I know, he muttered. No, I don't think you do. Because if you did, you'd realize this isn't about me. It's about all the people you've mentored, managed and made feel small. That kind of damage doesn't vanish with a single apology. He looked down, quietly unraveling. Danielle stood and gathered her things. A full review's coming, you already know that. Whether you stay or not, I hope you finally start listening. Because this job, it's not a crown, it's a mirror. And everything you are gets reflected back. She walked to the door, then turned once more. Respect isn't about rank, Ronald. It's about who you are when no one's watching. She left him in that room, alone, and outside, things were already shifting. By Friday morning, 2 evaluators from regional headquarters arrived at the branch. No smiles, no handshakes, just clipboards, documents, and a list of people to speak with. Danielle didn't return that day. She didn't have to. Her impact echoed down every hallway. Employees who used to whisper their frustrations were now being asked directly about their experiences. And for the first time in a long time, they told the truth. The evaluators, Charlene Booth and Marcus Lee, spent the day behind closed doors, calling in team members one by one. The conversations were calm, clear, but by early afternoon, a pattern had formed. Ronald Stratton's name surfaced again and again, not as a firm but fair leader, but as someone who dismissed ideas, mocked feedback, and only showed deference to those who looked or sounded like him. Kendall recounted how he belittled her for suggesting a system upgrade, an idea that was later implemented at another branch. Another employee, Brandon Poe, described how Ronald called him kid despite his 10 years in the field. When Brandon asked him to stop, Ronald laughed it off and told him to grow thicker skin. Even custodial staff had stores quietly shared but full of weight. By the time Charlene and Marcus compared notes, the truth was undeniable. This wasn't about one bad day, it was about an unhealthy culture. And Ronald sat at the center of it. Meanwhile, back at headquarters, Danielle reviewed Teresa's summary. She didn't grin, she didn't gloat. She simply underlined names. The ones who had spoken up, the ones who kept showing up despite the wait, the ones who deserved to be seen. She picked up the phone. Kendall Rhodes, she said, set a quiet meeting with her next week. Let's see what she can do without the burden she's been carrying. That afternoon, Ronald was called into a video meeting. Charlene, Marcus, and an HR executive joined. He sat stiffly in the same conference room where Danielle had first handed him her business card. This time, his shoulders were lower, his voice muted. They didn't yell. They didn't scold. They presented fact statements, transcripts, a timeline. This wasn't Danielle's story anymore. It was dozens of stories. Ronald tried to defend himself. I've given my life to this branch, he said. I've never had a formal complaint. This is being blown out of proportion. Charlene leaned forward. This isn't about one complaint. It's about consistent harm. We're not judging your intentions, we're examining your impact. Marcus added, and being in charge doesn't shield you from accountability. It holds you to a higher standard. Silence. Then, the final words. You're being placed on leave effective immediately. A final decision regarding your position will follow the completion of the report. Ronald didn't argue. He gathered his things, walked past his team without a word, and exited out the side door. No farewell speech, no exit line, just the soft click of a closing door. Inside, no one celebrated out loud. They didn't have to. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was clean, like the air after a long, brutal storm. But Danielle knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. That next Monday, the building looked the same from the outside, same red brick, same familiar signage, same morning rhythm. But something had shifted. It was in the way people greeted each other. In how they walked, more upright, more present. Kendall had been named interim branch manager. No big announcement, just a quiet change, a new nameplate on the door. Her posture had changed too, not stiffer, but steadier, like someone who'd finally been given room to stand tall. Danielle arrived just before noon, no entourage. Just a tote bag on her shoulder, low heels, calm presence. This time, no confusion followed her through the lobby. Just respect. Kendall met her at the front. Would you like to talk in my office? She asked. Danielle nodded. Let's. Inside, they sat down across from each other. A small lamp glowed softly in the corner. The walls were plain, but the air didn't feel stifling. I wanted to say thank you, Kendall began. Not just for what happened with Ronald, but for how you handled it quietly, decisively. You didn't come in to embarrass him. You came in to evaluate the system. Danielle offered a faint smile. He did the embarrassing all on his own. Kendall let out a breath through her nose, half laugh, half relief. There's been this culture here. One where, if you didn't match a certain mold, your ideas didn't make it to the table. You'd get cut off, or quietly pushed aside. After a while, you start thinking that's normal. It's not normal, Danielle said, but it is, unfortunately, common. Kendall looked down at her desk, then back up. I've got a few ideas. I've been holding on to things that could improve client service, shorten wait times. I don't want to waste your time. You're not, Danielle interrupted, pulling a notebook from her tote. Let's hear them. For the next 20 minutes, Kendall walked her through a handful of proposals, nothing flashy, just practical, well-thought-out suggestions, evidence that she understood both the numbers and the people they served. Danielle listened without interrupting. She asked a few questions. Jotted notes, not the kind people take to look polite, but real ones, like someone who intended to circle back. When Kendall finished, Danielle closed her notebook. If you'd had the support you deserved from the start, she said, these changes would already be in place. Maybe, Kendall replied, but maybe it took the wrong person stepping aside to make room for the right things to happen. Danielle didn't smile. She gave a single, measured nod. Make the changes, take the lead, and if anyone tries to pull you back into silence, call me. As Danielle stood, Kendall added, can I ask one more thing? Danielle paused. What made you come in person last week? She hesitated a moment, then answered, I used to work the front desk at a branch not too different from this one before Richstone. I remember what it felt like when the higher-ups only saw numbers, never the people behind them. I made myself a promise. If I ever got to the top, I wouldn't forget what the bottom looked like. Kendall was quiet for a second, then said, you kept that promise. Danielle met her gaze. So will you? She stepped out of the office and passed by Renee, who offered a small wave from the teller window. Danielle smiled and returned it as she walked out into the sunlight. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt grounded. Not because one man had been held accountable, but because a room full of people had finally been heard. Before driving off, she pulled out her phone and made one last note. Follow up with Kendall, 6 weeks. Because leadership isn't about showing up once. It's about showing up again. 3 weeks later, Danielle sat alone in a corner booth at Café Minette, a quiet spot nestled between an insurance office and a used bookstore in downtown Little Rock. It was her favorite thinking place. No staff, no meetings, no interruptions. Just a black coffee, a pen, and the thoughts that refused to leave her alone. She scrolled through her phone, rereading Kendall's latest update. Client response times down 22%. 3 new business accounts opened this week. Team morale higher than it's been in years. Danielle smiled, not wide, just enough to feel it in her cheeks. She hadn't walked into that bank branch expecting a ripple effect. She'd gone in quietly, planning to ask a few questions and follow up later through the usual channels. But then Ronald opened his mouth, and everything shifted. She was reminded of something her grandfather once told her when she was 12. They'd been at a gas station near Texarkana, waiting at the counter while the clerk helped the customer behind them first, despite the fact they'd been standing there longer. On the way back to the car, she'd asked why he didn't speak up. Why he didn't demand respect. He smiled and said, sometimes silence isn't surrender. It's the wind-up before the swing. She never forgot that. Danielle didn't need to raise her voice to make an impact. She didn't need to flash her title to command respect. What she did was observe closely and move with purpose. In that moment with Ronald Stratton, she hadn't just spoken. She had recalibrated the entire room. She stirred her coffee, then set her phone aside and picked up a napkin. On it, she scribbled, power doesn't always walk in shouting. Sometimes, it shows up with a pen and waits. It wasn't a lesson for Ronald alone. It was for anyone watching from the sidelines. Anyone who's ever been dismissed, underestimated, or told to stay quiet. Because the truth is people will always make assumptions. Based on how you speak, how you look, how they think you should be. They'll try to put you in a box you never agreed to enter, but that's their box, not your boundary. Danielle had never set out to be a symbol. But in confronting the moment with quiet resolve by demanding better without theatrics, she became something more. A reminder that the loudest voice in the room isn't always the one in control. She finished her coffee, folded the napkin, and tucked it into her notebook. Before heading out, she made a quick call to the regional office. "Hi, this is Danielle Mercer. Please tell Teresa Landon thank you for listening, for acting quickly, and let her know Kendall. She's not just doing well, she's thriving." She hung up. And as she stepped into the early afternoon sun, the weight of the past few weeks didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt necessary, because leadership isn't about a title or a salary or sitting at the head of the table. It's about how you treat people when you believe you don't need anything from them.